Hi everyone, this is Erica Sabo. Welcome to another episode of Mind It. Hey everyone, hope you had an amazing holiday. Today I'm going to be continuing my gaming highlights of 2013, so let's see what I've got here. So my first shout out goes to Crystal Dynamics' Tomb Raider Reboot. Now, I found this to be a groundbreaking game and by far one of my favorites of 2013, particularly because of Lara's representation. I know some people had problems with it because they're so used to the more adventurous, older Lara. The one with the total free spirit, no weaknesses whatsoever. However, what I liked about this Lara is this was part of an origin story, and this was a Lara that was willing to show her weaknesses and had to go through hardships all on her own. I really enjoy the self-sufficiency of it all, to be honest. And while some may say that she wasn't as strong of a character, I think that showing your weaknesses is probably one of the strongest things of all. And I found the writing to be amazing in that way. I think that Rhiannon Pratchett did an amazing job with that. I think that she created a very realistic representation of Lara, and I found it to be very raw as well. I found it to be something that can be really uncomfortable for people to want to write about or for people to want to portray, but I like that about it. I like how the company was willing to take risks with this idea. I think that the gameplay also worked very well with it. It's like an action platformer, and it was very like lush, beautiful world you got to work with and explore. There's so much to do, and it's very very enticing gameplay. I wouldn't call it addicting gameplay, but I would say it's very enticing, and it made you want to explore more and more of the world. So that, in combination with Lara's character, including everything else, whether we're talking about the music, the voice acting, everything, the animations, the graphics, it was all really impressive, and it's a reboot I'm really interested in seeing more of. The next game on my list is Eidos Montreal's Deus Ex Human Revolution Director's Cut. Now, this cyberpunk stealth action game came out in 2011, but it was re-released as a director's cut, which just does not happen often enough. It needs to have a rare quality in order for it to have a feature like that, and I'm really glad that Human Revolution was one of them. Now, I grew up watching a lot of friends play Deus Ex 1 and 2, and I thought they were amazing. I've never really been so much into stealth games, but I like observing. I love observing, and it's something that I've grown to really appreciate, is the stealth genre. I suck at it personally, but I love watching others play it. And seeing Human Revolution was just, it blew my mind. It blew my mind. Mostly for the atmosphere, really. The atmosphere is exactly as I would imagine it to be for a cyberpunk world. This futuristic world that that's full of hypocrisy, that's full of just a lot of things that you get to visit in dystopian novels, but brought to life in this interactive world. I find that really amazing, but also the decisions you make through your journey as Adam Johnson are really amazing too, and something to behold. Whether you are making really hard decisions in a conversation, or if you're trying to sneak past like an array of enemies, or you're doing various boss battles, it's really it's a very immersive game, and I think that's one thing that that Eidos has definitely excelled at. Now, man, like, there's so many amazing aspects of this game, but what I like most is the director's cut and how part of the team were able to come along and give bits and pieces of their thoughts and their views during the production process. That's something that I don't think we get to see often enough, is to get a view of what was going on during the time of production. I don't think that a lot of people always have, like, or exactly know what to think in terms of how was this game developed. Most people don't think about that kind of stuff. They don't think about the trials that go along in the process, and how difficult it truly is, and how there's certain things that you just simply can't avoid, and you just need to work around it or improvise. I think this game did a really great job of offering you that in a paced manner, without making you feel overwhelmed while you're playing the game. So if you aren't into stealth games, I would still definitely check it out, at least observe the game, at least get a hint of it, get a feel for what it's like, and try and get yourself immersed into the world itself, because the moment you can start getting that emotional attachment to it, you'll realize very, very quickly what a well-made game it truly is. So the next game on my list is Pandoras Tower. You might recognize the title. It's part of the campaign for Operation Rainfall. This campaign helped localize games like Xenoblade Chronicles and The Last Story. Now, Pandoras Tower was the last one to be released here in North America, but it's a really interesting game that has a very generic sort of feel to it, yet ends up providing something very unique, much like games like Nier, for instance. I think that Pandoras Tower had some really unique gameplay mechanics to it and a really interesting story. I think that one of the best parts about it had to do with the relationship between Aaron and Elena and the bonds that they had to create during this really just a really strange concept and really strange idea that goes on between the two of them without giving any spoilers. So whether or not you've heard of the game, it's definitely one that kind of crept in to the market. It wasn't like a big release. It wasn't like it wasn't anything that people were talking about non-stop. It wasn't like Xenoblade Chronicles, where despite it only being released at GameStop, it being an amazing game, or The Last Story, which also received a lot more marketing. Pandoras Tower did not receive as much of that, but it's still a really interesting, really unique take on the action JRPG genre. It's definitely not for everybody. I'll tell you that. It's definitely not for everybody, and it might seem a little bit too generic at face value. But as you put more time into it, and as you start immersing yourself in those bonds between Aaron and Elena, and you start realizing and relishing more so the concept at hand and the very unique ways of doing things in this game, you'll start to really appreciate it, and you'll start to realize that it's not often that we get games like this. It's no wonder that initially the company didn't want to localize it, and initially there was no publisher for it. And I'm really glad that Operation Rainfall was able to do something like this and bring 3 very interesting, amazing games to the table. The next game on my list is Fulbright's Gone Home. Now, you might not have heard of this indie game, but it was a great example of storytelling. It was a really great example of very subtle gameplay with amazing storytelling, and offers this sense of nostalgia, especially for the 90s, that I can't say I have experienced enough. Like, I have nostalgia all the time when I play. I very much consider myself a nostalgic gamer. I always end up going back to those old games, and that's part of why I have so many retro games, and why I relish retro games so dearly is because of that. And I think that Gone Home does an amazing job of helping you relish that. There isn't much in terms of gameplay. It's not really about that. It's about storytelling. It's about bringing those little bits and pieces of nostalgia back in your life, and giving you a dose of what was part of maybe your childhood, or just sometime in the past. Just something in the past that you might have forgotten about, and you can now relish and you can now appreciate in a way that you did when you were younger. And I think that Gone Home does a really great job of that. If you're looking for something very gameplay oriented, you're not going to find it here. You are going to find a lot of exploration here. You're going to find a lot of storytelling, and you're going to find a lot of memories. You're going to find a lot of things that, you know, you might not have appreciated as much as you did before, and this gives you a chance to. The game will definitely remind you of a lot of things in your own personal life as well. So it is a very personal experience in that way. It's very self-exploration, let's say that. And in a way you can then transcend that over to like some giant analogy or some metaphor for everything within the game. I find that really interesting, how you can take such a concept, such a simple concept, and turn it into such a big idea. I love minimalism, and I think this is a really great example of interactive minimalism. The last game on my list is, of course, Ni no Kuni, and just like last video where I put Tales of Xillia at the end, I put Ni no Kuni at the end because it had some special something about it that made for a great finale. Made for a great finale in a series of amazing games. And I think Ni no Kuni, Ni no Kuni is just, it's a nice bittersweet story. It follows a very similar formula to much of Studio Ghibli's films. If you're familiar with Studio Ghibli, or if you're not familiar with Studio Ghibli, it's part of Hayao Miyazaki's films, whether we're talking about My Neighbor Totoro, Princess Mononoke, Spirited Away, Howl's Moving Castle, and so on. There are so many amazing films, my favorites being Nausicaa and Princess Mononoke. And I think that Ni no Kuni was just another really amazing form of storytelling. What's really interesting about Studio Ghibli is that the stories are always quite simple, and they're a bit unassuming as well. To some extent. There are some that are definitely a bit deeper right from the get-go and a bit darker right from the get-go, but I would say that Ni no Kuni is a pretty soft and light-hearted story, despite having some very depressing elements in it as well, and that's something that I think we've grown to appreciate about Miyazaki's films, is the fact that he's able to carry on with this whimsical feel, yet have some really dark, depressing elements to them as well. The stories are always very bittersweet in a way, in a very beautiful way, and in a very magical way, and it gives you a time to really appreciate the life you're living, and appreciate life as a whole, and appreciate every little thing, as small as they may be. I think Ni no Kuni does a really amazing job at that, and it feels like you are playing a Studio Ghibli film, which is kind of a big thing for a lot of people. The fact that it's finally something interactive that we can play along with is a rare. How often do you have that? Not often. Let's say that, not often. Now in terms of gameplay, of course people have their issues. The gameplay isn't the best part of it. Like, the battle system can be a bit cumbersome, definitely. The AI isn't always on your side, but I think that there's a lot of other amazing things about this game that override a lot of those negatives as well. Like I said, and like I've said several times in the past, one of the best parts about an amazing game are the bad parts, because it kind of balances things out. You can never, well, I'm sure you can have a really amazing game with very few faults, but how often does that ever really happen? It's actually really nice when a game has its faults and it's so open to them and it's willing to show them. And what's great is to think that you might really hate something, but to think that someone in the world out there really loves that aspect that you hate. I don't know what you call that. I have no idea what you call that, but I find that really cool. I find that's a really good way of getting rid of my frustrations, is to put myself in other people's shoes who might think otherwise about something. So gameplay-wise, it wasn't my favorite part, but it was something that I can appreciate because I can see how other people might really enjoy that aspect of the game, especially in terms of giving commands. In the game. I think that's really interesting, and I think it's something that, yeah, you know, maybe they can fine-tune if they do plan on doing a Ni no Kuni 2, which I am crossing my fingers for. I'm definitely crossing my fingers for that. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot to learn, and I think level 5 overall, like level 5 does a really good job with their games, and none of them are really perfect, but they do damn good work on their games. I think that Ni no Kuni was by far one of the finest in their collection, not just because Studio Ghibli was involved. I think that in terms of challenge, yeah, there was plenty of it, and I like that. It gave that old school feel. That's another thing, is it has a very nostalgic feel because of that challenge. A lot of games nowadays, I feel, are trying to become easier, to become more accessible, and to be more accessible game, you need to have that, which I don't agree with at all, and you see it a lot. And I know that some retro games have just some really convoluted logic that how would you ever know? How would you ever know to do one thing or another thing? However, aside from that, there is a sense of difficulty, and that we are beginning to lose, aside from all that cumbersome crap, you know. I think that there is difficulty that we're starting to lose in our games, and I think it's something that people are losing patience for, and the easier things become, the less patient they become towards higher difficulties. They'll want more hand-holding, they'll want things to be easier. It very much depends on the game itself, but that's something that I don't think we should be sacrificing. And I think that if people really want that, then maybe we should give more of the option rather than forcing everybody on this one set thing. Who knows? I don't know, but it might be something worth considering, and it's already been implemented several times in the past, but maybe it needs to start being implemented more and more. I don't know. But Ni no Kuni wise, I was quite happy with the difficulty despite frustrating AI. Gameplay was so-so, but the rich story by Studio Ghibli really won things over for me. You can also say the same thing about the lush graphics. It looked great. It looked amazing for a game that, I don't know, it's different at the same time. It's, you know, it's not hand drawn in that way. Like it has its 3D elements to it, yet it's still so beautiful, and it looks about as good as you can get in terms of a 3D Studio Ghibli project, whatever that may be. So yeah, all of those things wrapped into one, you got yourself a really great game. Not a perfect game, but a really great game that you definitely should consider if you are into JRPGs, or if you're not. If you don't like the style of it, maybe spend some time with Studio Ghibli films and get a dose of it and realize that, you know what, you don't, you know, you never know. You never know. You could be anybody, and really enjoy the sensitivities of these stories and the subtleties of these stories as well. I think Ni no Kuni definitely excelled at that, and it's definitely a game worth checking out. So that was part 2 of my gaming highlights of 2013. I really hope you enjoyed, and with that said, I am really interested in hearing more of some of your favorites from this year, or maybe from well in the past. If you haven't really spent much time with games in 2013, just feel free to share your memories with me. Share with me games that stood out to you and why they stood out to you. I'm always so enticed by these, and I love hearing your thoughts, whether or not I necessarily agree with them, just because it's cool to hear other people's perspectives on these things. So please stay tuned for part 3 very soon, where I'll be announcing my last 5 highlights. And yeah, I hope you tune in again soon. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see y'all later. Alright, peace.